Om Agyantimandasya Gana Gana Salakaya Shakshurumitam Jena Tajmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manubhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadanti Sva Pedantikam Panchakalpaturubhisya Kripasindhu Vyevacha Patitanam Bhavnevyo Vaishnavevyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. So, this is new to me, so I click this because it's not up. No? No? So click here. Yes? Open. I'm not used to a PC either. So Hare Krishna. Thank you for coming. It's nothing greater for me as a joy than to share Prabhupada. I'm not here really to give a class. I just want to share what has been given to me. And that's been mostly in the kitchen. And so tonight, it's going to be more about principles, not details. So we're going to talk Prabhupada's principles that were in the kitchen, but actually they're meant for every part of our life. So these principles that are basically four things: quality, purity, punctuality, and cleanliness. Is it okay? Oh, you got all that other stuff. So what do we do? As I told you, I don't know this. Like that, and then we'll go down here for each one. Yeah? A little lighter. But this presentation actually is something I had used in Hungary when I was there for some time a few years ago, and so I thought I would just use this as a reference. But I'm not going to go entirely from this. I'm going to use it to help stimulate my memories. So, yeah, these principles that Prabhupada taught, he taught to all his cooks at different times, and even his servants, because these things are these principles, like I said, are details, and he may have given details to different servants and different cooks. Those are the details, and that usually changed according to time, place, Prabhupada's health. So what my experience may be different from another cook. So that's why I'm sticking to the principles, and I'm hoping that you will take them and use them, and they can be part of your journey. So let's see if I can work this. I'm showing, I'm going to go through these. So you see here Prabhupada's cooker. This cooker went with Prabhupada. I'm going to give a little background, a little history before I go into the principles. So here's Prabhupada's famous cooker, and you see him with it, and just the most beautiful thing, not the most, but one of the most beautiful things for me is just observing Prabhupada, seeing him. Not only he was so a Vaikuntha man, otherworldly, but just his features, his hand, every movement he made was like a mudra. You would find sometimes, or I would find, and others have told me the same, sometimes when he's speaking, I'd be totally lost in either the fragrance from the sandalwood coming off of him, or just his glow, or his skin, his hand movements, and I wouldn't even remember what he was even saying. That's how I would get lost in that. So you can see by his hand movements, everything was like that, and everything showed expertise. And to be in his service, he required you to become expert. And that's part of, let's see if I can do this. So I'm not going to go through the quotes. This was for something I did. It's not moving, sorry to say. There we go. So Yeah, the four main principles that Prabhupada taught, which I'm having trouble with this. Every time I click it, there we go. Every time I click it, it would come.
Page down.
Oh, the page down. Okay.
Okay?
Okay, very good. Okay.
Or you can do the page up, page down.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, those were the four principles, the main kitchen principles taught by Prabhupada, and I'll highlight those with different stories, and then there you got an idea of his cooker. And honestly, to share a little bit something, I had no qualification at all, and if I could impart something to you, which we all have, is desire. The desire was so intense. I mean, so much so that it was beyond even reason. There was one time that I wanted to be near him so much, and Prabhupada didn't require any cooking because he wasn't well, but the desire was so intense that he actually allowed me. And when I came back to the States and revealed that to a dear friend, Jamuna Devi, she told me, you actually made Prabhupada serve you, because that desire was so intense, and Prabhupada was so kind that he actually allowed me, even though he had no appetite. But those are other stories for more time. So I implore you, prayer and that intensity of desire, and you will get the Lord's attention, you will get Prabhupada's attention. And the other thing I want to stress is that your relationship, our relationship with Prabhupada is an active one. It's alive. And as much as we want it, will be revealed. I mean, I'm amazed at its stories. I don't know if any of you just read Shiva Maharaj's Vyasa Puja this year. It was another one. He had one several years ago about a granny, and you should look them up. They're so inspiring. Stories of often like an Eastern country that had never seen devotees, never seen deities, but they got Prabhupada's books. Read them. Prabhupada came to them in dreams. They became full-fledged devotees. They had their whole family become devotees. Even the dog became vegetarian. I mean, the stories are just wonderful. So my point being is, without going into those, is that Prabhupada is alive for all of us. And it is an active relationship according to how much we put into that. And what I want to share with you is, it's not that I was special, but I was there at a time, and actually the first person that allowed me into Prabhupada's service was our dear Devi Shakti here. And to me, she's Prabhu. She's my senior, she's my Prabhu. I'm not a feminist, but I see her like that. So if I revert to saying that, I'm not on a mission here, but that's how we related to each other in the early times. So she was very kind to me and allowed me to begin Prabhupada's service, because as she's doing now, she was doing everything. Not only his personal cooking, but his clothes, his garden, his house, his Tulsi garden. And so at any rate, she was my first teacher, my first mentor, and so I have a very special place in my heart, because she lit that fire. And I wanted you to see Prabhupada's cooker. This traveled with him all around the world, and he took it with him, and he was so expert. And I know he probably told different cooks at different times, but sometimes in the morning he would tell you what to put in the bottom and what to put in the second. So it's a 3-tiered cooker. Let's see if it shows it. No, we'll go back to that. It's a 3-tiered cooker, and the bottom is a single, it's like a regular pot, and the next two have holes in it. And within those holes, there's an insert in the second one, insert in the third one. And so Prabhupada was so clever, he would say sometimes put the shukta in the bottom or the dal in the bottom. And then he would say what to put in the second one. And then in that insert, you could have room to put some sliced vegetables. So we would do that. And then in the next one, it would be usually the rice at the top, and you could put vegetables on top of the rice, and then you could put vegetables around there. So through that, the bottom was one prep, second prep, third prep, fourth prep, fifth prep, sixth prep, and then you could turn the top over right there, and you could fry. You could make your chants, your tadka, or fry the Karela. So you could get 7 preparations out of this. It was genius. And then you make chapatis, and he would feed 4 or 5 people at a time, and he would do it all in 45 minutes. So that was Prabhupada's, he was expert. Did we just lose electricity? Trying to go down. I think maybe we've lost electricity because I'm doing page down. So, yeah, so actually, so as I said, Devi Shakti, Mataji, who was my first, and then actually came Palika, and then Pishima, and Jamuna, and I did get a very short glimpse. She would know more of Anand Prabhu. He was cooking for the devotees then in 74, 75. And he was also Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur's cook. So we got a glimpse, and I got more from Jamuna about what even he liked. And he did say that Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati liked so much salt and so much hing in his preparations that hardly devotees could take his remnants because it was so salty and so full of hing. But I thought that was very curious. So it was a wonderful thing to be able to have someone who was his cook. So you're looking to myself, Devi Shakti here, you know, it's cooked for Prabhupada. So we saw that when we saw Anand Prabhu, that he cooked for Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, and he was here cooking for the devotees, which again, she would know more because she was here longer. I just came through for the festival and got to meet him in a little bit in 75. And then, so we have, I didn't have a picture of Devi Shakti in the kitchen, but there's Pishima in the kitchen. She was very expert. She sat on the floor, used a foot knife, and I would come in. She didn't speak any English. I didn't speak Bengali, but we figured it out. And we would cook for Prabhupada daily, and I learned a lot from her. And there's Jamuna Devi in the kitchen at Radha Damodar. And then there's Anand Prabhu. And you see how his back is straight? Jamuna always said before he began, she'd see him doing yoga. He always cooked with that straight back. Do you remember him like that? He had, I mean, just look at it. And he was I think he was 70 years old or something, she said. Yeah, I've seen when they're cooked with the big pots to lift it up without pot holders. I mean, I've seen dip the finger in the hot sugar syrup and go like this and just lift the pots with their hands and carrying them across that kitchen where we had there for the devotees. It was absolutely extraordinary. So that, again, is part of being expert. And there's a picture of Prabhupada with him. So these were my beginning days. And I'm getting to, I told you a little bit about the cooker. I'm getting to, there he is filling the top over the rice. He's putting, you know, some vegetables. Prabhupada's teaching. Prabhupada taught by example everything. In the beginning, he did all the cooking himself for everyone. And then over time, as more came, then devotees would step in. And one side note, Jamuna broke it down to the phases of cooking in ISKCON. She called it Adi, the Adi period, the Madhya period, and the Antya period. And the Adi period was basically 66 to 70, and it was really very simple spicing because there wasn't much in America. There was cumin seeds, there was turmeric, and there was red chilies. And so that's kind of what the introduction to teaching, what everything was made with, and then, but it was also a lot of ghee and a lot of sugar and sour cream, and that's how Garunga potatoes came, and you know, so many things, the Simply Wonderfuls. I was told that story, the Simply Wonderful, you know, in America they only had powdered milk. Prabhupada had asked for something and that's what they brought. He'd never seen powdered milk before. So when they gave him that, he mixed that, and he mixed it with butter and I think powdered sugar. And I was told that he gave one to Janaki, who was Jamuna's sister, and he asked her what she thought. And she said, "Oh, Prabhupada, they're simply wonderful." So that became, they were simply wonderfuls. And I personally wasn't trained in ISKCON cooking because my cooking began when I got to India. So that was that period of time. And then the Madhya period was 70. So when the devotees came to India, and then they were introduced to mustard seeds, hing, curry leaves, green chilies. So, and then of course, then they started learning from different temple chefs and different homes, and so then it started picking up more and more. So that's just a little bit of background on that. And then what she described as the Antya period was 75 through 77. And that was really when paste masalas came in. And that's when the purity, Prabhupada stressed purity. And here we go, this was, so we have the black pepper, I forgot the black pepper. And so there was lots of halvas and sugary things. And then there wasn't any dals in America, and so they had green split peas. And they made these things called barats. There's no such thing as barats in India. I think they were trying to mimic bara. So, but they became barats, and they became, the ISKCON bullets. They were so heavy, and but they were wonderful. We loved them. We loved it all. And actually, in those days, also, we were only allowed 7 chickpeas. They literally counted 7 chickpeas and put on your plate for breakfast. You remember that? I mean, it was terrible. I actually worked in the kitchen where I joined in Paris, and I was new and everything, but I couldn't imagine 7 chickpeas, so I would hide a whole container of chickpeas up on the shelf where nobody knew because I was in the kitchen. But when you go out to the line, you'd get counted only 7 because you were told there were too much protein. We had all these things. So that was the early, Ganga potatoes were born, barats were born, Simply Wonderfuls were born, and that was the whole beginning of ISKCON cooking taking shape. So we move on then to, so yeah, I told you that, went to India, and then more Vaishnav cooking ingredients became, and Prabhupada, at that time, Prabhupada sent Jamuna to the Raman Reti to study cooking and study deity worship. And I'm sure you've all seen her books. I went up. And so then, okay, so here we are. We're using paste masalas, as I said. He focused on purity and quality. And I'm going to get to then. So, but I did want to go back to one story when I said the Om Gyan prayers. Prabhupada taught that as early as 1967. There wasn't any songbook or any other prayers, mostly just the Maha Mantra. But in 1967, Gaur Sundar and Govinda Dasi were serving Prabhupada, and he asked her if she could type, because he wanted her to type what he was translating. And she said, no, Srila Prabhupada, I can't type. And he said, well, you can learn to type. And she said, well, actually, I have no inclination. And he said that if you chant this prayer, he said, you can learn to type. He said, a devotee can learn anything before they begin to engage in the service if they repeat this prayer. So at that time, then it became that, and became an invocation before the devotees did anything. Before you entered the kitchen, before you entered any service, whatever you were doing, this prayer, and you know the translation of that to the spiritual master. So in the kitchen also, it was part of the internal cleanliness, but it also gives us a place where we begin whatever service we're doing, because we're totally dependent on the spiritual master and the mercy of the spiritual master. So this was when that was introduced, and it was a very powerful invocation to begin anything. And to this day, I try to do that before I begin anything, because I know I actually have no qualification. So as a result, I depend on that Prabhupada gave us. And so I thought I'd share that with you. So then the primary principles we're going to begin: quality and purity, punctuality, and then nothing wasted. These are 4 principles that Prabhupada insisted on to the nth degree. And so quality would be the quality of your ingredients. So when you whatever you're doing, you try to, it doesn't mean that you have to have more money or whatever, but you search for everything is conscious, whatever you're doing. So if you're out purchasing, you want to search for the best quality of ingredients, because with the best quality ingredients, you'll end up with the best result. And Prabhupada taught that through example, through so many different ways. And his senses were so refined, he knew the quality of anything the second he tasted it, or if he looked at it, he wouldn't even taste it. Devotees would ask, well, what is Prabhupada like? And it really became whatever was prepared well. Whatever was prepared well, then he would. An example of the quality of ingredients, Jamuna told a story about here in Vrindavan. I guess it was the other thing that you all aren't used to, but from my time living in India, everything was seasonal. So you'd eat cauliflower for 3 months. Grape season came, you ate grapes for how many months? Or, it would come like that. And so so this time was the santras or the musambis, the oranges here. And so Prabhupada took a juice in the afternoon, and so she'd made this juice, and he tasted it and said it's rubbish. He wouldn't even drink it. So then that was from Vrindavan market. The next day they went to Mathura. They thought maybe better. He tasted it, rubbish. He wouldn't drink it. Then they went all the way to Agra. They went to Agra and they got oranges, rubbish. He wouldn't. And so that was like, but the devotees sought out. We learned where to find the best ingredient possible and try to offer that to the Lord, to Prabhupada, because we knew that was the most pleasing. And that not only pushed the limit, but it taught us a higher standard. So we're always pushing that limit to serve in that way, that we offered the best to the Lord, we offered the best to Prabhupada. And when Prabhupada came to Miami, before I moved to India in '75, he came early, I think January, February, and I was of the nature where I always sought out the best things. I hadn't known that story yet. I didn't learn that till I spoke to Jamuna maybe later that year. But when he came, it happened to be citrus season, and my two favorite oranges were in season, and one was a tangerine, one was called Mineola, another was called Honeybell. So I asked Shruti, he was his servant, if I could make that. So I made that for him and gave it to Shruti to take in, and Prabhupada took one taste. Immediately he said, what is this? Where is this? Who has done this? He immediately wants to know. He'll want to meet the person. He'll want to know what it was, because he tasted the quality of it. So Shruti came out and said, Prabhupada. And I said, oh, they're the best this, the best that. And he knew immediately. And I, of course, that fanned my fire to serve Prabhupada more and to do more and to want. And then that same year, I came to Vrindavan in '75. I think you were getting ready to go to Tehran. And so I came for the 4 months of Chaturmas, and that's when I entered into that service through Davi Shakti. So, and then one other story to highlight the quality of ingredients. Jamuna told me when she was at Radharaman learning how to cook, they made Radharamanji these special fulkas out of this special wheat from Lahore. It was called Pishi Lahore. And they would grind it fresh that day, and they would cook them on gobar and neem. And so Prabhupada was coming, and she had just learned these, and she was so eager. She didn't say anything to him, so she went there. They ground the flour fresh. She came back. She made the fire with gobar, with neem. Prabhupada came. She put the chapati down. Prabhupada took one bite, and he said, oh, Pishi Lahore. She was amazed. She was Pishi Lahore, he said, and you have ground it fresh. He knew within how many hours it was ground. This is a true story. He said, it was ground such and such. He said, but if you would have left it on the tawa for 1-2 more seconds, it would be perfect. He said, 1-2 more seconds. I'm telling you, he was not only expert in devotion, I mean, everything, Prabhupada. And he could see and he could taste. He knew your consciousness. By the time you put that plate down, he took one look at you, and you were totally revealed. And if you didn't have that purity, that sense of in the fire, if you were, getting comfortable, he could see it, and none of that was allowed. So to stay in that service and be allowed in that service, you had to keep that. And these were some of the standards that he required. And so the quality of ingredients, and you can see how Prabhupada. There was one other one I'll just share with you. When he was ill here in Vrindavan 77, he really didn't have the appetite, and so I was trying to figure out things, and I think it was my first dahi vada in Italy, which I still haven't perfected it. But at any rate, when the plate came down, Prabhupada took the back of his spoon, and he touched the dahi vada. It had a little bit of enough of a spring where he took a bite. Then he took the back of the spoon and touched the idli, and he went. He said, soft means soft as cotton. Hard means hard as a rock. It should be soft as cotton. He didn't touch it. Wouldn't even taste it. But at the same time also he had no appetite, and he was allowing me this because I was actually, I was actually praying to Radharani and begging her to allow me to serve Srila Prabhupada. And out of his causeless mercy, he allowed that to go on. But I'm just trying to highlight Prabhupada's expertise and his desire for quality in everything. And it not only that, we see that in food, we see that in everything we do, the flowers we pick, the person that we become. We want to strive for this in all of our aspects of life. So even though I'm sharing with you from the kitchen perspective, these things we want to imbibe and expand on in our daily lives, because these are the things that Prabhupada gave. And so this is what we want to do, is to keep Prabhupada's standard and share Prabhupada's standard with everyone. So here we have his next standard was purity. And so that's where I told you that prayer, Prabhupada taught that. That's purity within, in their chanting, that's purity within. And then that's purity in our personal habits and our hearts, but he also required purity in ingredients. And this came, I don't know how much he stressed it in the earlier years, but he stressed this in 77. It started in 75. At the end, 76, we really started doing the paste masalas. So to do that, because he said everything in the market was cut. Even the sugar was cut, he said at that time, with cat bones to make it whiter. It was cut, the sugar was cut, this was cut, the powders were cut to make them go further, the milk is cut, with this, with water, with this. So he was stressing purity. And so what we would do is the night before set up, seemed like about 10 katoris, and it would have whole dhanya seeds, jeera seeds, rye, sarson seeds, mustard, and then it would be dried turmeric. That would be soaked for like 4 or 5 days. And then any dals, and then even black pepper. He had black pepper, whole peppercorns with the cumin. And so they were soaked, and then in the morning I'd come in and grind everything on the silbata. And so there were no seed masalas going in, anything was made. Everything was, you heat the ghee, you'd add the paste. And this way it ensured the purity. And he stressed that. So again, these may sound like kitchen talk, but these are principles to expand in our own devotional life. And these are the standards, this is the way Prabhupada wanted us to live. And that's really the goal that we want to do. If we maintain that standard and share it with others, you will have a very live and active relationship with Srila Prabhupada, because he'll be very pleased. The other thing is punctuality. This was serious business. I mean serious business. I know everybody has a story on punctuality with Prabhupada, who was with him. 12 o'clock meant 12 o'clock. Didn't mean 1 minute or 2 minutes after. 1 o'clock meant 1 o'clock. There was many reasons for that. It's not like he was a fanatic and just had to have the time. time was precious to him, and time was his service to his spiritual master, whether it was in his preaching, whether it was in his translating, whether in whatever letters he was writing, he was meeting with people, his own personal schedule. He was the most regulated. Time was everything. For me once, one of my stories, and some of you probably have heard it, is when I was in Calcutta. We had just arrived from Mayapur in '77, and we stopped at the Mango Grove, and then we went into Calcutta, and I went straight to the kitchen. Prabhupada went to his room, and he said lunch was at 1 that day. And I must tell you, I walked in the door, it couldn't have been more than 2 minutes after 1. And he was sitting, I don't know if any of you know, the Calcutta temple has these very large doors, very tall, I don't know, maybe 10 feet tall or 12, opening to the veranda. And where he ate was right there, right next to the door. He had his seat, his chonky. And so when I opened that door, he was staring at the door. I mean, just riveted staring in a very serious, sober voice. He looked at me and he said, "You are 3 days late." I never said a word, didn't say anything. I put the plate down. He said, "Don't you know when appetite comes, if you don't eat," he said, "disease will follow." He says, "If you don't eat immediately, disease will follow." I mean, I didn't say a word, but I made a mental note. So there's a lot in there, okay? Not only his time, he's sitting there, I'm wasting his time because he's waiting on me. Then he taught me the principle about when appetite is there, because he ate very regular. He says, if you don't eat at that time, he said, then disease will follow. So these were things that I stuck with me. I'm not very good at regulation with eating, but something I try to remember. By having Prabhupada's standards in my heart and my mind, it's a yardstick that throughout the day or whatever you see, you wonder, what would Prabhupada say? What would Prabhupada think? You know, I live in the West, and it's gone tipsy-turvy, crazy, faster than you could imagine. And the things that I see, I'm always thinking, what would Prabhupada say? What would Prabhupada think? It has just gone so far, madness. So by having these principles instilled, it helps me in that way, and I just wanted to share that with you. So I'm trying to think, another instance, it was Malati Devi, was cleaning Prabhupada's room, she was cooking, it was here in Vrindavan, and she tells the story where, I think I have her words here at some point. She tells a story where she was cleaning, she put the fan on to mop the floor so it would dry real quick, and she heard his footsteps, and she knew at that point she had to have the plate. I mean, when Prabhupada came in from class, I mean, it was so regulated. When I was here cooking for him in Vrindavan, when Devi Shakti taught me, I was doing his breakfast, she was doing his lunch, and I'd do the evening. It was timed so perfectly. When I heard that bell, I knew he was afoot. And I knew exactly how many steps it would take. So when that bell, after class, and I heard that bell, I was scrambling. I was scrambling, and the tali was going, opened the door, and when Prabhupada came into his eating room, I mean, his legs were crossed. He was just sitting. It was like an airplane coming to landing. His leg had crossed. He hadn't sat down yet. The plate just touched the ground. I mean, that's how timed it was. It was exactly, that was due to her tutelage of teaching me. And if you couldn't maintain that, you wouldn't last. You wouldn't last. That's what was required. And she instilled that because she knew that. And so that was part of the timing. And so Malati was saying that she was cleaning, she put the fan on, she was trying to do his desk, and everything on his desk was in a certain place, as you see it is now. His pens were here, the drinking water was there, his tilak case was there, everything was as it's supposed to be. And so she was in the middle of that, and she picked up the pen and moved it to the other side to wipe, but she heard his footsteps, so she knew she had to get the plate. So she left it on the wrong side. She knew it was the wrong side. But she went to go get the plate, and she was in her obeisances. And when he sat down, he said, "Who's touched my desk?" He knew it was her because she was right there. But she said she almost melted into the floor because she knew what she did. She left the pen on the wrong side. And so she said for the first time in that way, she realized what time meant to Prabhupada. Because he didn't see it, it wasn't there, he had to take the moment. I mean, we may think of it as a moment, but this is all in the perspective of time and the way Prabhupada was. He had to find his pen and move it to the other side. And I'm trying to think what she said, I understood in that moment how precious, she says, I understood in that moment how precious every moment was to Srila Prabhupada and how his absorption and his service to his Guru Maharaj was so deep and so profound that he couldn't squander even a half a second. I was so grateful for that lesson, but very ashamed that I had to learn it in that way. So we might think that these are small things or why does it matter, but it's the bigger picture and it's what he's teaching in the bigger picture. And he didn't have to go into details, and I'm sure she didn't say a word because most of us said nothing. When he would say it, you would get it, you'd understand it, or you would pray on it, you would think on it, you would reflect on it, and you would store it in there till the next time, because that's how you manage to stay in that fire of Prabhupada's service, because that's what it required. I think that's a few. And Prabhupada did express expertise. He wanted you to become expert. He gave used the word expert to many, many, many devotees. And so he told us to become expert with our time. He told another devotee, Yarabara Prabhu, you're very expert at photography. Now become expert in devotional service. He wanted us to become expert. And when he saw someone did something so expertly, it brought him great joy. So that was what we would strive for. And now Prabhupada's next principle was about waste. And that was a very big one. And he didn't waste time. He didn't waste, you read how he kept a diary and he kept count of every anna. He didn't waste paper. He didn't waste. The first time he came in the kitchen when I was cooking here in Vrindavan, he'd come in to teach a preparation, something called, I think it was a Punjabi buddy sabji. And he had taught it to Rundati. Pulika and I had left with Jamuna actually to go to Calcutta. She'd come and got the blessings from Prabhupada to do her cookbook. So he asked us to go with her, and we went to Bengal side to study with Pishima and some other cooks for her to do her research. So anyway, when we came back, Arundhati showed Pulika and I how to do this prep, and it wasn't right. So he said, I'll come in the kitchen tomorrow and show you. So I was just telling, I think, you this story, Dharma Prabhu, when Prabhupada had just come from his massage. So he had his gamsha on. He was just glistening, with the sandalwood oil, the mustard oil. As he stepped through the threshold, he paused, and because you'll see the doorway's low, and he paused at the door and he looked in and he said, I've never been in my kitchen before. It is very nice. And the first thing he did, he walked in and I was sitting right there and I had a steel bucket, like a cow milking bucket, and I chopped the vegetables and I put away what we were going to throw out, which we always threw out to the cow. But I had taken the cauliflower, the gobi, and it has that core, and I would wring it and take the flour off, and I took that core and I threw it in the bucket. It's the first thing he saw when he came in the door. He said, why you have thrown that away? I didn't say a word. I had no clue what I would have done with it, but I put it in that file to understand it, reflect on it, to research it. And what I began to observe by Indian cooks, nothing was wasted, nothing was thrown away. That would be chopped up and thrown in the dal. The leaves would be chopped and thrown in the dal. There was, nothing was wasted. So he saw that immediately. So that was my first lesson there on waste. And Jamuna told me a story once. He came in the kitchen, he saw 2 grains of rice on the floor. She said he he got tears in his eyes, and he looked at her in a very soft voice, and he said, "Do not waste a grain." He said, "It is a gift." That was it. Nothing more was said. But these words would go deep. These words would go deep, and they would stay with you, and they would alter you. So then, so we're learning now about waste. And she told another story about, I don't know what matches are like now in India, but then they were terrible. You try to strike a match, and it would take you, 5, 10 matches to get something done. So she was trying to light something, and Prabhupada was there with her. And she told the story. She'd strike one, and it would strike 2, 3, 4. She had a pile. She said like this. Finally, he basically snatched the box and took it from her. I want to see where I have that, because it was such an extraordinary moment of a lesson. But he took the box from her, and she said he cupped his hand, and with one strike, of course he lit it with one, and he looked at her, and he said, he looked at her, and she was puzzled, because she had a pile on the floor, and he just did one. And he looked at her, and he said, "A devotee should become expert, know how to use things properly, and avoid waste." And she looked at her small pile of matches on the floor, resting near the stove, and she realized just how Malati had thought in her mind, that she learned that hard lesson. She realized how far she had to go in these areas. So just the little things like that. He wouldn't have to say any more. You took it in, but he stressed, become expert, become conscious, don't waste. And he would say, so that word conscious, try to be conscious in everything. I mean, you can't be Krishna conscious if you're not conscious. So that was another part of the piece. To do these things, you need to become conscious. And to be in Prabhupada's service, you had to be conscious all the time, or otherwise, again, it's that razor's edge. I haven't looked at the time. So we are now, I think we only have one more. So we went to quality. We did that, didn't we? We did that first. And then, and I have here Davi Shakti being clean in the kitchen. And I could not remember that story. I was going to ask you before. But I do want to tell one more story, actually. It was with Davi Shakti Prabhu. When she was teaching me the cleaning, it was about waste. And so being from the West, I thought, okay, I'll turn the fan on to dry the floor. I didn't want the floor wet when Prabhupada came upstairs. It was his bedroom then. And Prabhupada must have gone upstairs for some reason, and he came downstairs. He walked all the way back down, and both you and I were downstairs, and he said, "Come with me." We followed him up the stairs. He opened the door, and he said, "Fan is on. No one is here. Who is wasting Krishna's energy?" It was a huge lesson. Huge. Because then I began to say, okay, that went in, waste Krishna's energy. It was a new concept for me. The fan, electricity, Krishna's energy. But as that deepened, and now in my life, everyday life, I'm constantly turning out lights. People come in and go, "Why do you walk around in the dark?" I mean, I go out of the room, I turn out, I'm constantly, my kids, "Why do you leave the fan on? Why do you leave the light on?" And to see it as Krishna's energy helps you in your Krishna consciousness, helps you deepen to what it all is. And when you see, it's not only there in the light and the fan, it's in everything. The money's Krishna's energy, the outside, the food, everything. And so then to take that principle again and try to focus on not to waste, it becomes another beautiful part of our spiritual life and our Krishna consciousness. And not to waste anything, because Prabhupada was so serious about that. So I won't tell that story. I did punctuality, time. There was that one story there, it's quick, here in Vrindavan. I don't know what the floors are. I haven't been in it. Is it still the black? The black? So when they did that, it's really hard to keep those floors clean because Vrindavan fine silica dust would be everywhere. And if you knew Jamuna, she cleaned with the toothbrush. It took cleaning to a whole nother level, which I had no ability to even comprehend. And she told me she would clean those floors 2 and 3 times before he'd come in and wipe and wipe and wipe. And Prabhupada knew what she was like, but he was pushing her further. He knew what she was like. So when he came in, he sat behind his desk and he said, "So, you didn't clean today?" She was just like, she not only cleaned, she cleaned 3 times, And he reached on his desk. He used to keep this little stapler. I don't know if it's still there, the stapler. He opened the stapler. He took his little finger and ran it through where the staples are. He opened it. There must have been a little dust in the stapler, and he said, "You call this clean?" She didn't say a word. Again, it builds on that whole principle. And some he would do that, and some he wouldn't. If he knew you could take it, he would take it further and further and further. And others, he said nothing to. He said nothing to. His cooker had to be so clean. You could eat off the bottom of it. There was no black. There was never allowed any black. And you'd be cooking on coal. You'd be cooking on coal or wood. So that was a daily chore. And one time she told me of somebody that was cooking. She was away, or she wasn't well, and they had taken the cooker and stuck it in a pillowcase and put it with Prabhupada's things and Prabhupada's up. But he didn't say anything. He didn't say anything to her. And he was to leave. And then he saw Jamuna come, and he changed his mind, and he said, "I'm going to leave tomorrow." Everybody was in shock. He said, "Jamuna will cook for me today." And when she saw that, she knew exactly why. She cleaned that cooker till it shined. And that was Prabhupada's standard. And he taught her, and he could push her because he knew she could tolerate it. But if you couldn't, Prabhupada didn't. He didn't push. And some he would treat with very kid glove, soft, and others he would, take them apart, gently put them back together. I'm sure Devi Shakti's had some of that herself. She could take it. I've known he's given it to her before. Let's see, where are we? So we did all that. So let's see else what I have here. So what I'm trying to stress in these, I think we covered them all. I will tell you one more story because it's here in Vrindavan and it was wonderful. When Prabhupada would eat, when he would finish, Prabhupada would eat alone. And he would take him up 45 minutes to eat, and he would eat in silence. He didn't eat with others. Sometimes if somebody came, he would, very exceptional, maybe there for some reason, or if someone just arrived, he may give them something from his plate and they would go. But he would generally, as a rule, always eat alone. And Prabhupada didn't eat, he relished. That was the word that we would always, he relished, he honored. He tasted. And you would come in sometimes, his eyes would be closed. His eyes would be closed, and sometimes his head moving, and you saw where Prabhupada could taste, and that's what he wanted to taste. And that's why your consciousness was so important, because he wanted you to know who you were cooking for. He wanted the cleanliness, the purity, and he could see on your face straight away. And there were some he didn't want their cooking, and others he would. So, but at any rate, my point here was, and after he would finish, we would come in to take his plate, and the way Prabhupada ate, the thali would be set up, and he'd have all the katoris, and the rice would be in the middle, and he would dump things to the middle, and then the katoris would be off to the side. And so sometimes you'd come in, it would be amazing. There would be rice, chapati crumbs, even on the floor around him. It was like, who was in here eating sometimes? And so when you would come in, he would sit there. He would sit there and watch you. He would sit there and he'd use a toothpick through his teeth, and he'd look at you, And sometimes he would point to where you would miss, where you're wiping. So this one day, Palika and I were both in there, and I had the plate she was handing me, and she was wiping. And I'm telling you, the ants in Vrindavan, I don't know the story of the ants, but the ants would descend. As soon as Prabhupada finished that whole table, the ants were just going here and there and everywhere. So Palika was wiping the crumbs, and she was wiping the ants, and Prabhupada's sitting there, and he was looking at her, and he said, "It is best to kill as little as possible." He said, if you simply, he went like that on the table. He said, if you simply, they will go. I'm standing there thinking, I got that. That got stored in my file. And so so then we went on. I had to have been maybe 3 months later. I was with him down. We left Bombay to go to a Bhagavad-Gita conference in Varda, and I was cooking for Prabhupada. I went on that trip alone, and I mean, not alone myself, but Palika didn't come. And so I'd come in that day, and there was rice, chapatis everywhere, and there was ants. So I'm thinking quite pleased with myself. I'm thinking, I got this. So I go, and Prabhupada's picking his teeth, and he goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "Oh, Prabhupada," I was quite pleased. I said, "Prabhupada, I'm making the ants go." He's looking at me. He's picking his teeth, and he goes, "Simply wipe them away." I couldn't even look up. My head was down. I was completely, didn't say a word, did what I was to do, went out. He didn't say another word. I was somewhere, I think I was at the Japa retreat here in this was about 7, 8 years ago. So Prabhupada's been gone all this time, but I've had all this time to reflect on that instruction. He told Palika to kill as little as possible and to tap. I tapped. I was so pleased with myself. And he looked at me and he said, "Wipe them away." And so I realized, so I was telling the story, and somebody said, "Oh, that's because she was in Vrindavan." And I'm like, no. I wouldn't assume what's in Prabhupada's mind. I said the lesson was my pride. I was quite proud of myself. I was quite pleased that I had this down. And Prabhupada could see it. He could see it. And so that's what I realized from that lesson. And the beauty of that is that's the blessing of the spiritual master, because he cracks the ego, he cracks the pride. And so that's what I realized, what he did. The spiritual master teaches us how to grow and what to look at and help us see that false ego. And that's the love of the spiritual master. And so that's what I took away with that. So our time has come, but I hope that some of these principles will resonate with you and you can expand them, whatever service, whether it's in the kitchen or you're out in the field picking flowers or preaching, doing something, because it's these standards, if we keep them alive and we share them and we continue them, they're not just stories of the past or the history of the past, they're alive, they're yours, and Prabhupada's very alive in our lives. And so if we share these standards, we'll keep Prabhupada alive in our lives. And the other thing he told us so much was to take care of each other, to care for one another. Prabhupada cared for us and took care of us. So many stories of so many devotees not well or this or that. Devotees, Palika came in with ragtag saris, and he'd look at her and say, "You need new sari? I'll buy you sari. Your husband, your husband took sannyas." He always took care. He always saw, and so that's what we need to remind ourselves also, is to care for one another and take care of one another and cooperate. Prabhupada said, "You'll show your love for me by how you cooperate." So I ask you to take these and use them. The Mahaprasad, yes, I'll tell you that. That was in Mayapur. That was in Mayapur, that wasn't here, but I continued that. But in Mayapur, just one last quick story. Because of the building in Mayapur, then it was, 3 stories or 4 stories, I don't know, that first one. And so after Prabhupada would eat, you would take whatever the remnants were and you would walk these floors and distribute it. And everybody knew Prabhupada's Maha was coming. And so they'd be standing out, there'd be little groups of 2 and 3 and 4, and this was all the men because the women weren't part of that building. And so honestly, it would take me 45 minutes to distribute, and to me, I was wasting my time because I had so much to do. And I grew to dislike this service so much that it was just eating my brain. But I never said anything, but the reason why I didn't like it is because everybody was so fussy. Oh, give me that, no, that, no, that, and it was like, so it took a lot, and everybody was waiting every day to get this, and the Bengalis would always take the green chilies. They were just very, very wonderful. They took those, but so I did this, and this would take so long, and one day when Prabhupada, after he ate, he's sitting there with his toothpick, and he's looking right through you, and he's pointing, and he's picking, and he says to me, and believe me, I said nothing to him. But I literally grew to, actually, it's a strong word, but I grew to hate this service because it was so bothersome. He was sitting there picking, and he said, you should mix everything. I looked at him, he said, when you distribute, he said, you mix it. I looked at him, I said, okay, Prabhupada. I went downstairs, I'm telling you, this shows the evil side of me. I went downstairs, I not only mixed it, the shukta, to the sweet rice, to everything, I took the palm of my hand and kneaded it like dough. I just swirled it and swirled it. It was this mash. And so I started going up, and everybody was in shock. They were just like, whoa, and I said, this is Prabhupada's instruction. He said to mix, and okay, a little bit. So the next day, they didn't know. I came out the next day, same thing. There was maybe a quarter of less people, less devotees. And every day I'd go back with the whole plate, and I'd eat it all myself. And it was nectar, it was pure nectar. By the 3rd day, there was nobody in the halls. Nobody. I took the plate, I'd zip. I was down in 3 minutes. And I'd go down, I'd call my friends, tell my friends that we'd come, we'd eat this, and I did it. And every day, after I still kneaded it like that, even though I knew nobody wanted it, I still kept kneading it, and we took it. And so Prabhupada, after about 5-6 days, he's picking, he's looking, and he looks at me and he said, so, you are mixing? I went, Srila Prabhupada, this is a very good system. And he just shook his head. But when I told that story to Dina Tarne Prabhu, and she said that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj did the same thing. I doubt his servants did as bad as I did, but they would mix the bitter, the sweet, the chewed, the pickle, everything. When I did mix it, the only thing that I didn't mix the chilies, because Prabhupada, we always put 3 green chilies on his plate, and he would dip them in salt, and as he was eating, because we actually didn't cook really hot so much, and he would dip the chili and eat it. And the Bengali boys would always take the chilies. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj told his cook to mix everything because he knew the Maya that was going on. People would only, and he asked his cook, before he started mixing, he asked his cook who was taking the fried, who was taking the sweet, who was taking the chewed. Chewed like this datta, this drumstick, it's like wood, so there's like this straw on the plate. And he wanted to know who was eating the chewed and who was it. And when his servant would tell him, so-and-so brahmachari, so-and-so, 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 and when he got to the chewed, he said, oh, he is understood. He said, I want you to mix everything. So that was the same, Prabhupada did the exact same. So that's the principle. The Maha, it's the mercy, it's a special blessing, and the Mahaprasad from the spiritual master, it's a gift. And so we have to see it as like we have to honor Prasad, and we see this as a gift, and we treasure this. So that was another wonderful lesson that Prabhupada taught, that we can we can all use. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. You see, there's one lovely picture here of Prabhupada. Yeah. Anyway, it's the end. Hare Krishna. Thank you.